Over these past 3 months, Kaguya-sama Love is War is a show that has slowly but surely worked its way into my heart. It's a comedic goldmine with nearly every joke landing to hilarious effect while also providing countless fodder for memes. To add to that, while I haven't read the source material, though you can bet on your life that I will, barring an immediate Season 2 announcement, this is the kind of anime you can tell is a great adaptation. The directorial prowess on display is something rivaled only by my own palpable locution in this sentence. God, that makes me want to slap myself. But actually, the directing is downright fantastic. There are several distinct techniques that the staff behind Kaguya-sama have utilized that, while not unique within the medium of animation, still show a strong understanding of its strengths and limitations. You can see this even when the animation is limited. Tricks are employed that make it look and feel much more dynamic than it actually is. But you don't have to take me at my word on that, because we're gonna dive in and dissect some of these scenes to show you exactly what I'm talking about. Now, when going through these methods, it's important to remember that they all try to serve the same central purpose of keeping you as the viewer engaged. The strategies for doing so vary from series to series, but also from medium to medium. For example, moving a camera through the third dimension is something so simple and ingrained in traditional filmmaking, yet anything but common in 2D animation as it's much less simple to implement well. It can be somewhat faked with a zoom, but typically that has to be either incredibly quick or very slow, so most shows animated for television, and especially anime, need to use other methods to make up for this natural lack of motion and variation that the camera can provide. The most obvious solution then is to just have the characters move more, or increase the number of times the camera cuts so there is new visual information to process. This tactic is even used sometimes in modern filmmaking out of a fear of boring the audience during slower bits. But with animation, you run into similar problems. More cutting means more drawings, which means more time. Likewise, having your characters move more also means more drawings. And in a medium like anime that is notorious for poor production cycles and the use of limited animation, the gap between new instances of visual information is wider than in something like film. Animation can, however, utilize different techniques to make this break less noticeable. 3 of the things I'm going to point out in this video are color, exaggeration, and just general motion. The first 2 are where anime can make up the most ground, while the last sometimes involves a little cheating. Because if you can't afford to have your characters move, make the camera be the only thing that does. Most commonly in anime, you'll see this in the form of a high-quality drawing that has at most a few frames of animation that then sees the camera slowly pan over it. Here, that movement, combined with the detail of the image, means there's a consistent stream of new information to process. Also, general panning shots operate under basically the same idea. But it isn't an uncommon approach when it comes to fan service either. Kaguya-sama is no stranger to this, as we're shown an example of one during the beach fantasy bit, but the series also boasts another instance that uses this principle in a much stronger and unique way. The scene in question is the wiener bit from episode 7. No, I'm not joking. After Chika begins mercilessly teasing Kaguya with the word, we see this quick montage of the duo in 3 distinct locations. Chika repeatedly pointing her fingers in the air while Kaguya is busting a gut. And if you think this sequence looks pretty good, I'd wager it's because of what we're about to discuss. Because there isn't actually a ton of quote-unquote animation going on here. Chika's dance in each shot is only made up of 8 drawings before it begins looping, while Kaguya laughing is only given 3, with a new drawing appearing every 2 or 3 frames for each of them. But that disparity in the number of drawings, combined with the 3 distinct pans, leads to a greater amount of visual information. Watch what happens when I stabilize each shot. Doesn't feel as dynamic, right? It still works because Chika and Kaguya, with their 8:3 drawing ratio, are almost always offset. When Chika's hands are here first, Kaguya looks like this, and the second time her hands are in this position, Kaguya now looks like this. It's a small change, but the picture, when considered as a whole, is different. Your brain notices that, and so then adding a pan substantially increases the work your brain has to do. Your eyes are now actively tracking them as your peripheral vision is processing the addition and subtraction of the background. And the pan moves every single frame as opposed to the duo who are animated on 2s and 3s, so every moment is again a different image. This sequence also provides a nice bit of contrast to the very similar, but mostly static, shot composition we saw only 30 seconds prior, allowing each to feel different. All of this for a dick joke. Truly, it's not the amount of animation, it's how you use it. And this philosophy extends to other parts of the series, even when it comes to the small things. The parts that might not necessarily stick in your mind. A prime example of this in Kaguya-sama is the backgrounds. Almost every episode you're guaranteed to see these racing, violent, and splotchy black and white lines accompanied sometimes by another color, as well as these more geometric and slower moving black and white shapes whenever we're in the headspace of Shirogane or Kaguya. Both are fluid and not only communicate a general sense of the situation through purely visual means, but also keep up this near constant feeling of motion. This is even the case for most of the more basic backgrounds we see. There's almost always something moving or drawing our attention even if the characters remain mostly static. Kaguya-sama is far from the only anime to use especially this latter type of background. They're incredibly common in shows that break from their typical visual presentation, and this is likely out of necessity more than anything, because many of the series that use this trick are set in high school. They don't have the advantage of showing off a sci-fi or fantasy backdrop every episode. And like it or not, there are only so many ways to make a classroom, hallway, or gym visually appealing and interesting, so these backgrounds become a convenient and relatively easy way to spice things up. But Kaguya-sama is somewhat more restricted than the average show, as a majority of the skits so far have taken place exclusively inside a single room. The result is a stoking of the creative fire and getting quality use of the backgrounds in a vast majority of situations. Be they full-on location changes, just something flashy behind our characters, or the more stereotypical motion lines common to anime. All of them serve the goal of keeping the show visually stimulating. This is aided by another aspect the show excels at: color. Good lord, I love the use of color. Even beyond the characteristic red and blue associated with Kaguya and Shirogane respectively, they go over the top with the rest of the visual spectrum as well. Just to give you an idea, out of my own curiosity, I wondered if I could construct a rainbow with just the backgrounds the series provided. The answer was yes, quite easily in fact. You are honestly spoiled for choice if you want to try and do the same. There's also the fact that often the colors, and therefore background, will change at the drop of a hat to better complement a joke, usually to great effect, while at the same time still achieving that goal of keeping you interested. And the styles in which the colors are presented are also constantly changing, from solid sheets to lens flares to sometimes no color at all in order to exaggerate a potential feeling within the scene. Which brings me to my final point that I want to highlight: exaggeration. It's one of the principles of animation, but what sticks out to me is how Kaguya-sama Love is War utilizes it. Like all prior elements, it's meant to keep things engrossing. Every animated production uses exaggeration to some extent, as recreating real-life actions is only so compelling, and Kaguya-sama decides to use exaggeration just for the hell of it. It's used during moments you'd expect, of course, such as characters breaking from their models, but also for incredibly small things. One of my favorite examples of this is at the end of the cat ears bit. Kaguya and Shirogane find themselves broken up from their trance and then whip away from each other as fast as humanly possible. It's over the top, fun to watch, and perfectly punctuates the end of the joke. There's also a similar use in episode 10 at the tail end of the cake scene. All they do is look away from each other, but the frames in between the start and finish get smeared, giving their current annoyance with one another that little extra punch of speed and frustration. And there are numerous other examples of exaggeration I could point to, but I'm gonna leave it with another one of my favorites. That being the climax of Shirogane's second conversation with Kashiwagi's boyfriend. After consistent pestering, Shirogane's final attempt at convincing him to get a job comes in the form of him striking the table with his thumb to the point where it ignites like a match, heating up the surrounding room and a country of Japan. There's so much to unpack here. First, the shot of him striking his thumb makes use of impact frames. You know, those things that are typically only seen in balls-to-the-wall fight scenes. Second, the fact that his energy is portrayed as having a very literal effect on his environment. Kashiwagi's boyfriend becomes sweatier, and even Kaguya, who wasn't fazed by any of Shirogane's logic, is being affected. And then there's showing the thermometer breaking and weather report changing just for good measure. Everything in these few shots is a microcosm of how exaggeration in this series is used to its fullest for comedic effect. Kaguya-sama Love is War operates under an idea of controlled visual chaos. Using motion, color, and exaggeration, the show is almost always giving you something to look at, even if it's something minor like, say, Chika attempting to casually whistle while Shirogane and Kaguya carry on a conversation. At the same time, when the craziness is toned down and things are calm, it's often when the tone is more serious, putting more weight and significance on the dialogue of these scenes. But all around, this series uses the aforementioned elements to great effect when it comes to conveying relevant feelings and plot points through visible information. Plainly put, it's got a great sense of visual storytelling. There's a reason why so much of it has been stuck in my head. At just about every level, there's a dedication to make this a visually striking and entertaining series to watch. So the next time you find yourself really being sucked in by an anime, look at what it's doing in regards to motion, color, and exaggeration. But those are just my thoughts, and as always, I'd love to hear what you have to say. There's plenty about Kaguya-sama that I didn't touch on, from the specific romance aspect, to the S-tier voice acting from basically the entire cast, and so on. So whatever your thoughts on the series are, feel free to let me know down below. Thank you so much for watching, and as always, an especially big thanks goes out to my awesome patrons, HinikuHou, OverjoyedSoup, MVPino, James Morton, Mr. Idealist, Marbled Ranger, Spudge, Beorn, and everyone else whose support helps make videos like these possible. If you'd like to join those awesome people, links to my Patreon, shirts, and everything else are either on the screen or down below. Leave a like if you enjoyed the video, follow me on Twitter, stay awesome, and I'll see you next time.